Hi, everyone. I'm Jillian Sidoti. I am joined by Nate Dodson. And I just
Hey
swallowed
guys.
weird.
As she
Look, as soon
chokes
as we
on
started.
candy, it's the Halloween stepping in. She's choking on the Reese's Pieces. It's okay.
Oh, I
Take a
wish.
minute.
You know what we used to do when my kids were little? We would tell them that we had to check all the Reese's peanut butter cups because we heard there might be razor blades in them. True story. We used to do that. Gather them all
I
up.
think
You don't need these.
that's just been the way to do it. And I don't think I ever got like a Reese's peanut butter cup in my Halloween basket. But now I actually realize why. So thanks for cluing me in that my parents have been
They all had
robbing
razor
me of
blades.
candy my entire life.
Right. Exactly. Oh my gosh. Everybody, welcome. Welcome to Entrepreneur, where every Tuesday at 1 p.m. Eastern and noon Central and those other time zones, other times, we do a live stream where we give you marginal business and legal advice for your life. Both both Nate and I are serial entrepreneurs and lawyers. I don't practice law anymore, but Nate does. And today we're going to be talking about contracts, which, you normally would think, I think, Nate, maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong. You normally think like contracts, so boring. I'll just call a lawyer. But these are things you need to know that you need them.
I mean, they're really no-brainers, but it's even more than just you need to know them. You need to understand, the value of having a written document versus, hey, can we just shake on it?
Yeah, exactly. Oh, for sure. Oh my God. How many times have I made that mistake? And I'm a lawyer, guys. And I've made that mistake far too many times. Okay. So we're going to get right into it. And I'm going to tell you in the show notes, they should already be there. You will find two different downloads. One download is some of the essential documents that we're going to be talking about today and some guides on how to do some other things that we're going to get into. And the other thing is a goal planning little mini course, totally free to you. There's nothing to buy. We're not trying to trick you. So go ahead and download those, but wait till the live stream's over. Okay. Let's chat.
Let's be honest. What makes you feel more like you're getting lied to than somebody saying, now I'm not here to lie to you?
I'm being honest. I remember when we were kids, my anytime my brothers were like making a joke and they were, screwing with my parents, they'd always end whatever they said with honest. Just that meant they were lying for sure. Anyhow, everybody, let's start off, Nate, with foundational contracts. What are some of the foundational contracts all entrepreneurs need?
I mean, at the end of the day, if you bring on partners, you need that partnership agreement. I honestly think that is the most foundational agreement that you need, is how you're working with the partners. Then you have how you're working with your team. And I know a lot of like employment contracts where I say, hey, something needs to be in writing, and sometimes it's just a handshake. I don't know about you, but I have very rarely used employment agreements. But if you don't have a written agreement, everything's really laid out in state laws wherever you're located.
It's so
anyway.
funny. It's so funny you said that. Yeah. Yeah. And it's funny because I was going to ask you, do you have any employment contracts? Because I was never one for employment contracts. I would make an offer to somebody and tell them, this is what I'm going to give you. This is what I'm going to give you for salary. This is what I'm going to give you for benefits, what have you. But I never wrote a lot of employment contracts. We did a regular, something you might want to put into your repertoire, and this is not part of the package, but that you can download. But one thing that we did start doing was regular employee reviews to justify any raises we gave or didn't give, that kind of thing. So that that to me is probably more important than an employee contract, because, you know, we were in California, and I think I think I speak for most states, are at will employment. So you could fire somebody anytime, you know, for almost any reason. But what was really important was to make sure that you were documenting any type of, you know, write-ups from a human resources perspective, like why I'm cutting your hours, or why I'm not giving you more work, or why I'm not giving you a raise, to me was more important than the actual employment contract.
You know, I think you bring up a really good point. Now, there is a contract with employees. It's called your employee handbook. And hands down, you have to have that in writing with everybody that works underneath you. But that is really what defines if it's at will, the employer-employee relationship. I've had people ask me, well, can I get that offer in writing? And I'm like, well, do you want to record this Zoom call? Because that was the offer. It's not more complicated than that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And employee handbooks are important too, and they don't have to be overly complicated. I've written many employee handbooks. Some other foundational contracts I think are important are, you know, anytime you have an agreement, and as lawyers, I mean, this is a no-brainer for us, but not for everybody else. Client agreements, customer agreements.
Important.
Yeah. And, you know, as lawyers, we have to have that. Like, that was required. But I feel like, you know, even in my coaching, you know, when I was doing coaching on a very regular basis, or I was even doing consulting, I always had some kind of client contract. So everybody was on the same page as to exactly what was going to happen, and who was going to get what, and what the expectations were. And to me, that's really important. So definitely have, you know, formalize your agreements with your clients.
And this is where it's really important stylistically for everybody to think about it. Because if you whip out a 10-page client agreement, their first response is going to be, great, now I got to call my attorney because I don't know what this thing says. I will always say that, and I've done a lot of these customer style agreements. I try to have them no more than 2 pages. Granted, the font may be about that small, but I try to fit it into, just from you know, the perspective of whoever is expecting to sign it. It's this weird, like a short agreement. It's enough for me to understand, to chew on. I don't need to call a lawyer. Well, you can say the exact same thing, but if it's 10 pages long, the default is I need an attorney. So when you're thinking about your contract with a customer, try to keep that order form as short as possible, even if you're creating 2-3 columns. Don't, you know, attorneys, we create lots of legalese. We hide things between the commas. And I know Jillian knows exactly what I'm talking about, even though she doesn't want to admit that she's hidden plenty of terms between the commas. But
you have to. You kind of have to in some ways. You know, I that's just protection. That's just protecting yourself. You're not trying to trick anybody.
And I got to tell you, like, if you ever hire me to do a contract, you better reread it, because I'm generally putting in some weird terms, like I get your firstborn child, just because I want to know if you actually read the contract, or I'm going to let you just move forward with, like, whoever you're working with promises you their firstborn, because I want to see how long it takes before somebody catches it. It's so often that people just don't read, but you have to present it to them in such a way that they don't feel like they have to read.
Yeah, for sure. Well, and the thing is, like, I'm not trying to trick anybody, but the idea is that, and you know, if you want to have good business relationships, you should not start off with, I'm going to try to trick somebody, or take advantage of somebody. I always find that to be karmically bad. forgetting legally bad for a second, it's karmically bad to try to trick whoever you're going to go into business with. But you do need to put things in there that are going to protect yourself. So for example, when I was practicing law, in our engagement agreements, we had something in there that was truly just meant to scare the client. And like, honestly, it was literally, and I would tell them that that's in there to scare you. Which was that, we charged a flat fee, which I think you still do, right, Nate? And
Yep.
we charged a flat fee. And then with that flat fee, I would put in there, if you make us like change your documents X amount of times, or if you redeem these complete and you make any significant change, we're going to charge you like a ridiculous hourly rate. We had something in there like $525 an hour.
Oh, that
Only
was
a few people.
ridiculous. That's our base rate now.
Yeah, well, I mean, like at the time, yeah, I mean, we're talking several years ago, and it was like $525 an hour, and it was like, if you make us change these documents, we're going to charge you this rate. And only a couple of people would pick up on that, and then they would ask me, and I'd tell them straight up, I've never actually charged it. I've never charged it because like it's enough to scare people to not to be sure what they want and not not screw things up. So, or not,
So
come back and ask too many questions.
comically, in 2009, I had a client that was using your old firm. And I actually managed to steal his business because he was
I think I know
afraid
who
of
it
that
is. I know exactly who it is.
$525 listed in there hourly. Like, no, we're nice and easy. Here's what the fee is, and let's go.
That's awesome. I love that. Well, I mean, we did have that happen. I know not just that person, but I do know of other people who were like, we're not going to hire you because, you're too expensive. But this isn't about that. You got what you paid for, in my opinion.
Yeah, but it's really important for what you're talking about and for everybody to think about this is the scope of services. And when you're providing this service that is on a fixed fee basis, you got to make sure that you know how to limit that scope. This is exactly what I'm going to do, nothing beyond this. Otherwise, where does it end? That's where you start as an attorney getting the daily phone calls. Hey, I'm just calling to chat a little bit more. Also, why attorneys tend to bill by the hour was because it's really important to shorten up that scope to make sure that you know exactly what you're providing and the client knows exactly what they are getting to.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And just do this for yourselves. Yeah. So, and make sure your guarantees are very clear, stuff like that. So, foundational check, just client agreements, vendor contracts. They define the scope of your work. They clarify the payment terms. That's important. They set expectations for delivery and performance. And, most importantly, they clear up any or prevent any misunderstandings.
I've got one more contract that is
that thing in writing.
Yeah, just as foundational as, and I actually use it more than anything. You have the partnership agreement with your partners. You have the client contracts with the clients. You have your vendor agreements with who you're working with, but your contractors, the people that you are contracting with, but they're not an employee, they have to have something in writing. They don't have the employee protections, but you got to make it really clear that they're not your employees as well. And every state tends to have certain language or certain requirements that if you're not going to be an employee, certain steps or certain terms need to be met.
Yeah, actually that's actually part of our next segment, which is protecting secrets. Moving on to protection. Yeah, I know. Secrets, keeping your business secrets safe and maintaining competitive advantage, right? Like we want to maintain competitive advantage. And if we have a bunch of vendors or contractors or consultants out there running around telling everybody our secrets. We're not protecting ourselves. So this is where your non-disclosure agreements come in. And a non-disclosure agreement doesn't actually have to be a separate agreement. It could be part of your vendor agreement. It could be part of your contractor consultants agreement. But as part of the free documents that we gave you, I do have a non-disclosure agreement in there. They ensure that your sensitive information is treated sensitively. So yeah. Sensitively. Yeah, sensitively. So it's really just, securing those secrets, getting that NDA done. Now, have you had any instances of people stealing and not adhering to NDAs, Nate?
Non-circumventions more than the NDAs with the non-disclosure agreements, and often they'll call it a NCND, non-disclosure, non-circumvention. Those, I've had clients deal with those issues all the time, that they hire somebody in or they contract with somebody, and then they share their contacts, they share their strategies and information. And then whoever was providing that service is just like, well, why do I need you? I can go ahead and do it myself. Well, now all of a sudden you're circumventing your contract parties or your contractors or the people that you're working with. That's been a serious issue that we've dealt with repeatedly over the years. The non-disclosure, we haven't so much, but let's be honest, it's really difficult to prove that unless you truly have something uniquely protected.
Yeah. The thing is, like, I always used to do non-compete agreements, especially with contractors, and NDAs for sure with contractors. But I found it, I was in California. Non-competes are basically with employees pointless.
With employees, and you said a key term there. I can't hire you as an attorney, but then have you sign something to say you won't be an attorney anywhere else. It's just not going to be supported. However, if you are a business that's in competition with me and I have you sign a non-compete agreement that is reasonable in scope and geographic area, and it's with a business, more of a negotiated agreement rather than, hey, I just need a job, those actually will be enforced by courts, and I've seen them enforced in sometimes very painful ways.
Oh, really? Do you have an example?
Sure. A great example, and this was, I'm going to give you a real example, not naming any names or who they are, but one of the largest law firms in Las Vegas. The named partner's wife has a child care business that hires nannies on the Strip. Everybody that works for this nanny service, they have to have their own nanny business. And every one of them, and they do that to get around the employee rules, but also every one of these nanny contractors has to sign a non-compete agreement that binds them, the company, but also the principles of the company. So it's kind of an end run to a employee non-compete. Well, we had a client that did the nanny service, signed the non-compete, decided to create their own competing service, went to court over it, and a nanny gets found liable for over $100,000 just for competing in the same general area. It wasn't even like a secret. They were just providing nanny services on the Las Vegas Strip. But it was two companies contracting, and the courts absolutely enforced it.
Oh, that's rough. That's rough. That seems very, and see, this is the thing, like I have watched, particularly in Silicon Valley, I have watched, highly paid officers, or maybe not so much officers, but executives of major tech companies, jump from, Google to Intel to Google, and then to Apple, and doing whatever they want, and going to wherever they want, just because they have, a carrot dangling in front of them, and
Yep.
then these tech companies just dangle carrots in front of these people all day long. And to me, that is to me that's shady, right? Like,
Oh yeah.
if I'm Tim Cook at Apple, I certainly don't want my faithful soldiers to be jumping ship and going to Google or wherever else. But it happens. It happens, like, every week up there, and the California law doesn't allow these companies to stop it, which is fine. They're all making a ton of money. They can all eat their own. I don't really care. But however, now you're telling me this story about this young nanny. I don't know if she's young, but this nanny, and to me, those are the people that those kinds of laws are supposed to protect. Do you think that there is going to be a national non-compete
I think there
ban
is.
per se?
I think it's like brand new. I don't know if I don't think it's a law. I think it's like an executive order from the president. But
Oh, really? Oh, I didn't even
so,
know that existed. Oh, look at me, not knowing anything.
I mean, I literally think it's from within the last couple of weeks. I think it's just that brand new. But it is still very specific about employees. It still wouldn't protect this lady
Okay,
that had
I
a
see.
contractor agreement instead of an employment relationship, which is the major difference between the two.
Okay.
With
All right.
non-competes, in
So,
order to be enforceable, they have to be reasonable in their limitations and their geographic scope. You can't tell an employee, hey, you may have worked in this field for a decade, but now you can't work in this field in the entire state of Florida. That's can be unreasonable, a geographic
right.
scope, but saying, hey, you can't work a competing business within the next 2 blocks may be way more enforceable. And that's, again, assuming that nationally or statewide, they haven't said, hey, you just can't enforce this against employees.
I feel like, though, this is such an interesting. I feel like this is an interesting conversation. I hope the people who are watching will find it interesting, because, like, I think about. I don't even know how this memory is coming back to me, but I think about when I was a kid and I used to go to this hairdresser. And the hairdresser was like, I'm going to go and open my own hair dressing shop. She worked for, a chain or whatever, and she's like, I'm going to go open my own shop down the street. And there was this question of whether we could go to her because we were clients of the original hairdresser. And, you know, I mean, I think that goes at any level of profession, whether it's a hairdresser or, a lawyer or a CPA or a dentist, and any profession that's providing a service who has an employee that then starts stealing clients. Can people protect against, say, that, like, taking clients?
Yes, absolutely. And all day long. That's the non-circumvention.
Okay.
And that is absolutely enforceable against contractors and employees. I can tell you, just from the legal world, it happens all the time, where I have attorneys that have left and they're like, well, I have this book of business. I'm just going to take these clients with me to get this kickstart. The big question is, are they really your clients or are they my clients? And that ends up being the defining issue of whether or not somebody can actually take a client or not. That being said, if the
I think
client
that,
says, I want to go,
yeah.
I can't stop them.
Okay. I guess that was my next question. Like, I mean, with a lawyer situation, we know from ethical things and all that kind of nature, you can't stop somebody from leaving. However, can you stop somebody from, maybe not from a lawyer perspective, but let's go back to the hairdresser example. If I'm a hairdresser and you're a hairdresser, and both of us have fine coiffs, hair, we really know how to do hair. If you're a hairdresser and I'm a hairdresser, I work for you. I have a book of clients. I'm like, I'm out. Bye. I'm going to go open my own hair salon, and people choose to leave you and come to me. Can I accept them even though we have a non-circumvent agreement?
And that, I think, is where it gets to be very difficult. Like, if you only have the clients because I was spending money on marketing, I have a vested claim and interest in those clients. But if you're out there shaking the bushes, not on work hours, and you're creating your own network of clients, do I have a claim against it? And plenty of employment contracts say I get the right to anything that you create during the time frame of your employment. And that's used not just with employees, but also very often in inventions and in patents. Who gets the claim against it? And you can argue this was outside of the scope of the employment all day long, but if the contract says, but it's a 24-hour gig, whatever you create is actually mine, I think that is enforceable.
Mm-hmm. Oh, good. Okay. All right. So then actually you brought up something funny, which is our next subject, which is intellectual property, which I think to me is one of the more misunderstood areas of law and protection. The thing, and I'm actually gonna say patents aside, because you really need a patent lawyer to help you with a patent. And patents are for inventions. And I think sometimes people misconstrue what a patent is. A patent is, there's only certain things that are patentable. You can't patent necessarily an idea. You have to patent something that can be tangible and real, right? Like if I said I want to patent a time machine, but I had no idea on how to make the time machine, you can't patent that. I've also had people try to tell me they want to patent certain types of software when that's actually not so much patentable either, because you really need to do a copyright. But let's talk about copyright and trademark for a second, which are two items that are under two different departments, I guess you could say, in the government. The USPTO takes care of patents and trademarks, whereas the Library of Congress takes care of copyrights. And I think what people misunderstand is that they have to register in order to have protection, but that's not necessarily true, correct?
That's not true really across the board. With copyrights, you still have a claim on it, whether or not it's been officially filed with the Library of Congress. That being said, you're trying to enforce it. You better have evidence that you created it, that you claimed it when you claimed it. Because if you and I create the same thing at the same time, who has the right to it? And actually filing that copywritten material with the Library of Congress sets the date of when you're claiming that protection. But it doesn't change the fact that you can still say, this is my book, I created it.
Right. Yeah, it's like writing a song. The minute you create something, you have the copyright to it. Now, the question becomes, did you publish it so other people could know about it? Like, if Nate and I both write happy birthday in our homes, and then Nate publishes that happy birthday and I choose not to publish it, it's going to be very difficult for me to prove that I created it prior to Nate. And then I also have to prove that Nate knew about it. So that's why these things exist, to further protect you. You do have protection naturally once you create something, but your protection is further is enhanced, if you will, when you file with the Library of Congress your copyrights, or with the USPTO your trademark. Another thing about trademarks, though, is that there's four types of trademarks. There's arbitrary, fanciful. Those two are trademarkable, but the ones that are not are generic and descriptive. So it's why if I named my Apple company, that is descriptive. I can't trademark that. That is not protected. But if I name my computer company Apple, that's arbitrary. And so I can protect that. So those are the four types of contracts. I can't believe I remember that from law school. Good for me.
Kind of an interesting thing, and I've got you to thank for even having to think about this. We trademarked crowdfunding lawyers.
Right.
We are the only company that can claim to be crowdfunding lawyers. There actually is some companies out there that predate our crowdfunding lawyers, so we can't stop them from being a crowdfunding lawyer because they were that before we ever claimed we own this. So the prior use is a permitted, hey, I can't force anybody into it. But also, and you don't know this, at the same time we filed for crowdfunding lawyers, we also filed for syndication lawyers.
Oh, you did? Oh, God,
we
did you get
did,
it?
but that we were denied on.
Okay.
Because of the obvious use, the descriptive use. With crowdfunding lawyers, we could show this massive database, this wealth of documentation that this is our brand, that we claim that this is unrelated to the services. Here's how we're known. Versus these syndication lawyers, it was more descriptive in terms of, we're attorneys that create syndications. And we didn't have all of the backup repertoire to be able to show that, no, this is our brand. This isn't just a description of what we do.
You know, it's funny that you say that, because this brings us to another really important point, especially when it comes to trademarks, not so much copyrights. But trademarks are it's really important that you are using the trademark. The trademark office does not want to grant trademark registrations to people who are just, namby-pamby deciding to trademark things. Otherwise, all of us would go out and, trademark a bunch of stuff and then try to sell it to big companies. It's kind of like similar to, what is it? Internet squatting, right? You buy a bunch of domains and then you squat on the domain in hopes that some big company will buy it from you.
We do this all the time.
Yeah. So, but with trademarks, the USPTO actually makes you prove that you're using the trademark in commerce in order to keep that trademark. They want free enterprise. They don't want to restrict people who are trying to use a trademark when there's somebody over here who has a claim to the trademark and is having it dormant. That's really not helping with innovation or commerce or anything like that. So if you're going, one thing I can advise you before you go file for a trademark, and by the way, that pile, it's not really a pile, it's a download. The download I have for you that has the, some contracts in it for you to use also has 2 guides that I created. One guide tells you how to copyright something, and the other one tells you how to trademark something. So you can download those guides from the bit.ly link that's in the description. Here it is right here, bit.ly /essential dash contracts. And you can get all of those contracts, and then also 2 guides on how to protect your intellectual property. So those things are hopefully going to be helpful to you, but you can do this yourself. These are things you can do yourself. If you struggle and you have a hard time, definitely call a lawyer. Or you know what? Honestly, I'm going to give you my email address. You can contact me. I'm not practicing law, but I'm happy to give you some direction if you have some issues with doing
So
that and,
let
telling
me
you what to fill out.
correct one thing that you said.
Uh-oh.
You can file a trademark before you are using the
True.
trademark in
Yes.
commerce. However, you can't get officially registered until you're using that trademark in commerce. And you can file this, it's a category B. I don't even remember what the categories are.
It's a
And
1B. Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. It's a 1B. It's a 1A is if you're using it in commerce, and 1B is if you're not.
and you have
Yeah.
6 months to prove to the USPTO that you're actually in fact using the trademark. And if you don't, you can file for an extension of that 6 months, or you'd lose it and you can't actually get the trademark. So you have that great thought. I encourage everybody to go and look at if somebody has already trademarked it, because if they have, you put all of your energy into starting a brand, to starting a business, to starting a product, and in fact, somebody else may already own it. So it is.
Not just no, absolutely true. Not just that though, but like it costs money and you'll lose your money. They're not going to give you your money back, and it's not cheap. It's like the last time I did it, I think it was $750. So it's probably, we have inflation now, crazy inflation. I doubt inflation hasn't touched governmental entities, right? So
They have an expedited processing that's around $250. But that's only to do the expedited. We're not helping you. It has to fit in these categories.
Oh,
But
okay.
every single trademark that I filed for probably a decade has miraculously fit into one of these money-saving categories.
Oh, that's great. Oh, wow. Yeah, not me, unfortunately, not me. I've done a couple and they've always been like ridiculously expensive. So yeah, you want to make sure that you check that out. And by the way, that's in the guide. It tells you exactly how to run a trademark search before you go through all this effort, because the actual trademark application is not an easy process. It sounds like it should be really easy. Like I upload my logo, call it a day and go home, but that's not exactly what happens. And you'll see once you get into it, because you have to pick categories. Like for example, let's go back to Apple for a second. Apple computers. Well, I have to pick the categories I want that trademark to be good for. I want Apple to be, my Apple logo to be able to be used on computers, phones, et cetera, et cetera. I have to pick out those categories and pay the trademark fee for those particular categories. But if I was going to start, I'm looking at a drum set right now. So like Apple drum sets, well, that's a different category and thus requires a different registration. So those are, and I don't think drum sets is a category. It's probably like musical instruments, but you get the idea, people. I just want to remind everybody to put their questions in the comments. We will get them, and we will answer them about intellectual property before we move on.
Before we move on, I do want to mention one thing because it comes up all the time. I'm always asked about your business structure, your asset protection structure, how you own and operate your multiple streams of income. And kind of the first stop is we always talk about a holding company that owns your passive interests, whether it's from an investment deal that you did or a business deal, or you're an investor in some third-party business. Having a holding company that keeps all of the passive interests all together. But if you are doing multiple businesses, or you have a larger group of employees than just for one business, we'll often do a separate holding entity just for intellectual property. Where the intellectual property rights to any of the business systems are held, trademarks or copyrights are held. Not only is it
Do you use
for
a series LLC, or do you use a series LLC for that stuff, or do you just use a regular old LLC?
For the holding company, I like to use series LLCs. For the intellectual property company, I will tend to keep it uniquely separated, because until you really monetize your own intellectual property, there's really no revenues there. Their tax filing is nice and easy. Generally, it's an LLC or something that goes right on your tax return. So it's not a complicated thing, but it will protect your intellectual property. Then ultimately, you're a great entrepreneur. You have these multiple businesses through different LLCs. Maybe you have some employees that you share between businesses. Well, you can also create these license agreements or royalty agreements between your businesses and your intellectual property holding company. And it's a good way to bring more cash and more assets into more of a protected structure. God forbid the businesses get sued or you get sued. It's a way to make sure that you still maintain your ownership regardless of what happens with the business.
Sure. Yeah, no, that's important. Great. That's actually really, really great advice. All right, let's move on to handling disputes. Nobody wants a dispute, but unfortunately, no matter how hard you plan, disputes can arise. So, my favorite things to use in dispute situations is, first and foremost, you alluded to this at the beginning, is what I call negotiating the divorce, before it happens, before the marriage, right? Like having those prenuptial agreements. And what are your prenuptial agreements in business? They're your partnership agreements. They're your operating agreements. Those are your prenups, your negotiations of the divorce prior to the divorce. And you can put negotiations for the divorce in any contract, and we call those dispute resolution clauses. For partnerships and operating and LLCs, you really need to have a partnership agreement or an LLC as part of the package that is in the comments below that you can download. Again, that is bit.ly/essential-contracts. I have two different operating agreements for you. One is a multi-member contract operating agreement, and the other one is a single member, which means you're basically negotiating with yourself. So maybe this part doesn't really apply. But let's talk about
But it's still
resolution.
important if you can just talk a little bit about what multi-member actually means legally, how it affects you versus doing your own LLC.
Yeah, I mean, for a multi-member LLC, that just means you might have investors, or you have partners, or you have a combination of the two, and you want to make sure that everybody knows their role, what their rights are, what their voting rights are, what the manager can do without the consent of the other members. If there is a manager, who's the manager? How can you get rid of the manager if you need to? I'm actually dealing with this right now. In an investment I'm in, where the manager doesn't want to go and all the investors want to get them out. And so the investors all had to read the operating agreement and figure out how to get the manager out and things like that. So, and then the other part of it is there's what we call a dispute resolution clause in there. And this particular dispute resolution clause, it calls for two things. One, you can't sue, right? According to the operating agreement, the investors cannot sue. Well, that doesn't sound fair. Well, it is, because we have a dispute resolution clause, which helps both in my opinion, I prefer dispute resolution clauses. They help the investor and they help the management resolve things in a less expensive manner. First, you have to go to mediation. And I love mediation. I love it / hate it.
Can't we just
I started off really strong there. Yeah, I started off really strong there with my love of mediation, and then I ended not so strong. But let me explain why. The thing about mediation is that it's cheaper. It's definitely less expensive. It's less time consuming. You can be more inventive with your resolutions and how you settle things in mediation. Mediation is does take a lot of stress off you. The thing about mediation in my experience is nobody walks away happy from mediation. Everybody walks away at least a little disappointed. You just have to determine how disappointed are you willing to be.
But at the same time, like, that's because everybody agrees to the resolution. Nobody's getting
Right.
100% of what they
No.
want.
Yeah. Yeah.
So get over it. I think that's the fastest, easiest, and most equitable way for all parties involved to get to a resolution. So I'm a huge fan of binding, non-binding mediations. At the end of the day, it really just expedites and help bring the parties together.
I was in a lawsuit once, and I was personally in this lawsuit, and the lawsuit was a bogus lawsuit, and I should not have been sued. Like everybody, including the mediator, agreed like this was a bogus lawsuit, but we agreed to go to mediation. And there was an insurance company involved, so it wasn't coming out of my pocket. So I was like, sure, I'll go to mediation, whatever. And I still was disappointed. It didn't cost me anything, and I was still mad. I was
But you
mad
knew
that the
you were in
guy
the
who
right.
I knew I was in the right, and I was just like, I couldn't sleep for like 3 nights thinking about how this guy got money out of my insurance company for being wrong, and then and how unjust it was. So you just got to be prepared for that. But I will tell you, where I did save sleep was for the rest of time, because I wasn't in the lawsuit anymore. The lawsuit was at least over. So those are that's what you have to give up for that stuff. And then the other kind of way to dis- resolve disputes without going to court is arbitration. And what do you think of arbitration, Nate?
I think it's court light. You do
Yeah, it is court
have
light.
a independent third party that's supposed to be fair to all sides, making a decision that may or may not bind the parties as an alternative to going to court. But
Yeah,
I say they're
yeah.
supposed to be fair and reasonable. If you look at
Yeah.
so many of those corporate contracts that are out there, it says we get to pick the arbitrator, and oftentimes that arbitrator isn't fair and impartial. So it's really something to take into account based on who you're getting into an agreement with, who chooses the judge.
Yeah. The thing is, I've had some really great arbitration results. I represented a couple of people in arbitration, or actually, you know what? Now that I think about it, I don't think I ever represented anybody during an arbitration, but I showed up to arbitrations a couple of times as an expert witness, and I always showed up as a witness for a client or something, and I had some really great results for some. I didn't have any results. I suppose my client had some really great results a couple of times. And then I had this one time where the result made 0 sense. I think that the arbiter just wanted everybody to go back to their respective corners with a zero-sum game. I don't know why, but that's what the arbiter seemed to go for. And it was horribly unfair to my client. And after that, I've been forever jaded by arbitration.
I have met a number of attorneys that don't like arbitration and don't like mediation. They prefer to go straight to court. But the reality is they're in the business of going to court. They're billing by the hour.
Yeah.
And the more ruckus and problems they can cause, the more the attorneys make at the end of the day. So, I say that with what I do and what my team does, we're not litigators. We try to resolve the issues before they ever become an issue at the lowest cost compared to there being a problem. Then it costs tens to hundreds of thousands of dollars to get it resolved in court.
Right. Right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, who knows? I think a lot of times when you file a lawsuit, if you file a lawsuit and you're strong enough in your lawsuit and you're aggressive enough in your discovery, you can force a settlement of some sort. That's satisfactory. Sometimes not. You know, you always
And
wish
I
things would go one way.
And you bring up a really good point is there's multiple ways to attack somebody that has breached an agreement through the courts, through leveraging mediation strategies or forcing
Mhm.
arbitration or getting to court and overwhelming people with documents and discovery and you know the changes, amendments with hearings, just overwhelming the other side to the point that they just have to say, we can't financially afford this, so we quit.
Right. Right. Yeah, I mean, we we quit. Nice. I know, I know. So, all right. Let's back up for a second here because one thing, we're talking about all of these contentious things, but what we're really trying to say here is we want to prevent contentious things. All of
Right.
this is meant so that your business runs a little smoother than if it didn't have these things. And you can sleep tight at night knowing that these things are taken care of and done and are in writing, etc. So let's talk about adapting because you could create all of these things that we're talking about. You could go to a lawyer, you could spend all kinds of money, and you could think you have the tightest ship in the sea. And the reality is that you're still going to, as businesses evolves, as your business evolves, as the market evolves, as the law evolves, you're going to have to adapt. So to always remember that, none of there's always an opportunity, or there's not always an opportunity, but there's going to be opportunities to amend agreements if you need to, terminate agreements, terminate clauses to give you the flexibility, to adapt. So don't feel like, oh, I got to get this all done. I got to get it perfect. I got to get it, you know, Nate made a great point of not having 10-page documents, but rather having 2-page documents that just make sense and take care of it. You can always make it longer. In case in point, I remember we made our own engagement agreement super crazy long. And one day I, much to the, you know, what's the word I'm looking for? Protest of my partners. I was like, we got to slash this down a little bit. We've put so much stuff in here now that we're just, like you said, scaring clients away. So keep that in mind too. You're not a law firm. You're a business owner. You're an entrepreneur. You want to get things done. You want to get things done quickly. You want to get things done efficiently. You do want to protect it, but you don't want to protect yourself to the point of your like, all I can imagine is somebody in a suit of armor who can't walk. Like they have the suit of armor on. The suit of armor is definitely going to protect them, but they're not going to get anything done because they can't move.
I like to think about a contract as a legal algorithm in terms of you're walking on down the road and then something happens and the contractor or the contract should say what's next. And it should try to solve for as many potential what next there are without getting ambiguous, meaning that it's so just out there and confusing that you don't really know what it means. And at the same time, not so tight that you end up with these super lengthy agreements. And to use your example of a lawyer's engagement agreement, I have a strong preference to seeing that one-page engagement agreement that just says, I'm your lawyer, you're paying me this, here's how I'm billing you. And it's one page and that's it and move on. Where I think we're still using this 8 page engagement letter that takes care of all these what may happen, could happen, and filling all the holes because before they become problems, is one direction better than the other? And I think a lot of it comes down to just what does the other side expect, and making sure that the scope and expectations are the same, but then for God's sake, try to keep it as simple as possible.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Keep it simple, stupid should be your mantra for sure. But at the end of the day, I find that always those long contracts are born of either a worrywart who gets nothing done, or they're born from problems that happened, right? Oh, we got to add this in because we had this problem with this client, or we had this problem with this employee, or we had this problem with this vendor, whatever, like problem came up. That's how you ended up with that extra clause in there, because you had something happen. So, all right, guys. Well, we covered a lot today. We have 4 minutes left. And you definitely want to go and download those essential contracts, even if you don't use them. Here it is again, bit.ly/essential-contracts. If you want to work on your goal setting, you can go to this link, bit.ly/your project 2025. I commandeered project 2025 and made it yours. So yeah, you can judge me all you want. I don't really care. Anyhow, that is us. And come back next week when we talk about more stuff. Come at 1 o'clock. Yeah.
All of this is so important to you're starting a business, you're growing a business. If everybody is like, what's the first thing you need is a mentor? Well, here you go for free. It may not be, tailored exactly to your business, but you know what? That's why you need to bring some questions so we can tailor it to how can we help?
Yeah. The more questions you guys bring, the better the topics get here. So putting questions in the comments is always like a great way to get your business questions answered, and to get more targeted content to you for what you need for your business. And we're going to be covering, I'm actually looking up the subjects we're going to be covering in the future, so I can tell you all, so you know to tune in. We're going to be talking about how you can work from anywhere in the world, what you need to do.
The digital nomads,
because I know a lot of you out there want to do that. That's actually how I ended up in Puerto Rico. I was planning on being a digital nomad, and then COVID kind of happened, and we kind of squashed that idea to try to get our life back together, and ended up just let's just move to a tropical location. So we're going to talk about that a little bit at one coming up, and we're also going to talk about how to start a side gig and hustle in this economy, and what you should do. I'm going to talk. We're going to have one event where we're going to talk about starting a subscription service, how to do that, what it look like, and then also we're going to talk about how to crush in your local market, which I think is super important. I think people underestimate, being the superstar in your super local market. So those are some of the things that are coming up, guys. Come check it out.
I'm excited.
Nate, any final words?
Hey, you know what? The things that we covered today, it's what every entrepreneur needs to know and to be aware of. Some of the things, like just make sure that you're protected as much as possible in writing, so you know how to deal with problems before problems exist. And at the end of the day, there's you have to know them, you should know them, and this is the stuff for you to dream about. Well, this is you have to know. So that's what we're here to help you with.
Awesome. Thanks, Nate. Thanks, everyone. Have a great rest of your week.